Hello guys, this is part 91 of ASP.NET video series. In this is continuation to part 90. If you have not watched part 90, I strongly encourage you to do so before continuing with these sessions. In this session, we will discuss about registering a user using registration page. One of the problem for the example that we discuss in part 90 of this video series is that we are not able to navigate to register.axpx page if you are not logged in. Let's see how to solve that problem. So what we need to do first, we need to create a project. Web.application. Create a new project. ASP.NET web application. Click this. Next. Name should be web application 1. This is the correct name. Then choose your location. My location would be part 91. Select it. Create. We need web form, and this will create our project. So now this is the application that we have been working in part 90. I'll show you because I have made the project in part 90 also, but we are showing you from the scratch. So we need to add 3 web forms, and we need to add registration folder also. It's taking too much time. Okay, it is happening now. Need to do what? Here is the solution explorer. We need to delete unwanted files or folder. I need to delete it. I need to delete it. I need to delete it. In the global.axs file, need to put comment this line, and then go to delete this also. Don't need that. We need to delete this AXPX default pages. Need to delete contact page. Need to delete build config, and need to delete about AXPX page. Need to delete fonts. Those are the unwanted files and folder. Delete this. We need to delete app dot folder and keep rest of them. And we also need to delete this web.config file. We need to add a web config file. First we need to add what? Folder. New folder, name it at registration. registrations. And now to add to web form also. new item, login.axpx, add it. We need to welcome.axpx, what I made a mistake here. What I made mistakes. Welcome.axpx, okay. Add it. Now remove this login.html. We have wrongly added it. We have to add it web login.axpx. Okay. Add it. Now we need one more web form, that is add new item register.axpx. Okay. Register.axpx. And here we also need to add web.config file. Where is the web.config file? I think it is here. Web service. Where is the web.config file? Web form master, web configuration file. Okay. Now we also need a web configuration file for the project. Okay. This one. Okay. Now we need to go to Notepad and copy and paste the here. Copy this much of coding from here and go to the and paste it here. Okay. Save it. Okay. So if you go to the login XPX, we also need to copy and paste. So copy this piece of coding from here and paste it in between the div. Okay. Now see the design. So this is our design of login form. Same thing we will apply to register form. Go to the notepad. Where is the registration page? So copy from table and paste it into the register.axpx file and see the design mode. That is our design mode. Now what we need to do, we don't need to specify any coding, HTML coding here. So we have done with our web config. Now I am on this login.axpx. So I have this logging page. Now when I navigate to this logging page, I have link here, means control F5 is taking time now. So I have a link here to go to the registration page. Okay, I did not click that button also. What you need to do, go to the design and double click this logging and save the changes, and again go to the logging .axpx and run the project application, run the application. Now I am on this logging page. Now when I navigate to this logging page, I have a link here to go to the registration page. Now I don't have any, I don't have a username and password to log in. So obviously I want to register first and I want to get to the registration page. Look at that, when I click that link, I am not able to navigate to that page. Okay, I am not able to navigate to that page unless until I log in. This is incorrect. So let's see how to correct this problem. First, let's understand why we have this problem in place. Okay, that is because if you remember, in part 90, in part 90, we have enabled form authentication. Go to the web.config file here. We have enabled form authentication, and then we also included the authorization element. Okay, so we want to deny access to anonymous. Okay, so with this authorization setting in place, the end user now will only be able to access logging page. Okay, because we have specified the logging URL login.axpx. So without logging into the application, you can only access now login.axpx page. If you try to navigate to another page including the register or welcome.axpx page, you will be denied access. You will be redirected back to login.axpx page. Okay, so to solve this problem, we can add another web.config file to the registration file. So I have already added this file. So what we need to do, so in this web.config file, I am going to include another authorization element, and here I am going to allow access to all users including anonymous. So if we specify star, means come to the notepad and here copy and paste this line of code and paste it here. Okay, so if we if we specify star here, look at this star, that means all users. So now the settings that are pressed in this that are present in this web.config file are applicable for all the pages within registration folder. So a user can get to register.axpx page with this setting without even logging again. So let's run the application with the setting in place and see if that has worked. So I am on the logging page, so need to first save the changes, logging page, and run the application. So I am on the logging page again, and I can click on the link. Let's see what does happen. Okay, we need also to do one thing here is also enable the on click. Go quickly, and where is the register page? Double click that here. Now save the changes. Go to the login page and run the application again. So I am on this page and I click on that link and navigate to register.axpx page. Okay, look at that. Now I am able to get to the registration page. Okay, now obviously this registration page, it is a very simple page. Here you have the username, password, confirm password. All these are static text and text boxes to provide those fields, those detail. And when I click the register button, we need to harvest these values, send them to SQL server, and we should store them in a database table. Okay, and on this web form, I also have some validation controls. I have used some validation controls and validation summary control, so the user will not be able to submit the form unless and until they provide these details. Now, if you are new to validation control, because we are not going discuss we are not going to discuss about validation controls now. We have discussed about them in the previous sessions of this video series, so please check those video sessions first. So let's go to the register page. So let's go to the register page. So if you look at the register page, very simple HTML. So very simple HTML. Where is the HTML? Here. Okay. So very simple HTML. Those are the validation controls. Those are the validation controls. Those are the validation controls. So you look at them. There are a lots of validation. There are lots of validation, as you can see here. Okay. So there are lots of validation control. Control here, and then obviously when I click the button, register button, that is when we want to retrieve those details. that we want to retrieve those details and save them to the database. So first we need to create the database table. So let's flip to Server, SQL Server Management Studio. So I want to create this table user. So what you need to do, go to the Visual Studio. I have this, create this database, execute it, success, go to the DB. Our database is this one. Where is it? Click it and then okay, now execute it. Okay, so this is the table. So if you look at the table, create table TBL users, and we are going to have means here you are being showed here we have and we are going to have 4 columns. Here we are going to have 4 columns. Here ID, username, password, email. So ID is of type integer. ID is of type integer. That is the identity column and a primary key also for our table, and username, password and email are of type nvar char. Now we have discussed about what is an identity column and how to create identity column and how to create tables and stored procedure in this SQL Server video series. If you haven't watched that videos, I would strongly encourage you to watch them as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this table. So create this table, execute it, and watch refresh the database. And here it is. Okay, this is the our table DBO table user, and we will have the table there. Now at the moment we don't have any rows. Now we don't have any rows. Means if you select from user, so now we at the moment we don't have any rows in the table, so we have all these 4 columns. We have all these 4 column: ID, username, password, email. Now obviously we need a stored procedure as well, which will add this user to the table, and to do that I have another stored procedure here, sp register user. This is the stored procedure, sp register user. And if you look at the stored procedure, it is taking 3 parameters. It is taking 3 parameters: username, at password, at email, columns. So obviously those 3 parameters are going to provide the values. Obviously those 3 parameters are going to provide the values for username, password and email columns, and we don't have to supply the value for ID column. We don't have to supply the value for ID column because that is the identity column. The value of identity column are automatically computed on the fly when the row is inserted. Okay, so we have those input parameters. to the stored procedure, and this is the body, and this is the body. Within the body we have two variables. Here we have two variables, as you can see it here. Both of them are of type integer. Okay, both of them are type integer. One is called count, one is called at count, one is called count, and the other one is return code. Okay, return code. You will understand in a bit what those variables are for. So first, what we are doing, so when we pass in a username, when we pass in a username here, when we pass in a username, password, and email to add to the database. Now remember, username cannot be duplicated. So if a user registers with his username Surrender, he should not be allowed to register again with the same name, with the same username. So username have to be unique. So username have to be unique. So how do we enforce that uniqueness? Uniqueness you are finding. So if I get a username to be added to the table, what I am doing here, I am writing a query. I am writing a query here. Select at count of username. Select at count. So I am writing a query select at count here. Okay. So into this variable, in this variable, I am selecting the count of username. I am selecting the count username. I am selecting the count username in this variable. So in this variable, I am selecting the, so into this variable, I am selecting the count of username where the username is equal to at username. Okay, whatever username we pass in, we compare of against that, okay, whatever username we pass in, we compare against that. Okay, if there are, let's say one username already with that name, I will get that into this variable. I will get that into this variable, in this variable. Okay, I will get that into this variable at count. So if at count is greater than 0, so if at count is greater than 0, then we know that the username exists in the table. So in that case, we are setting the return code to -1. We are setting the return code to -1. If at count is greater than 0, then we are setting the return code to -1. Okay, that means username exists. On the other hand, if it is not greater than 0, then we know that it should be either equal to 0 or less than 0, in which case we insert 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 that row into the database. So we supply the value for username, password, and email. Insert that into TBL user, Okay, here in this table, TBL user. Okay, but before that, look at the return code. We are setting that to 1. So if the return code is -1, that means the username exists. If it is 1, the username does not exist, and we have successfully inserted that into this table. We have successfully inserted that into this table. Okay, and finally we select that return code, this finally we select that return code and give it to the .NET application, and within the .NET application we retrieve that value and determine what to do depending on whether it is -1 or 1. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see how to invoke this stored procedure from .NET application. So on the register page, I click that button control. That is when we want to do that. Okay, so just to save time, means go to the Visual Studio. First of all, you need to close that, and in register page, so when I click this button, register button control, that is when we want to do that. Okay, so just to save some time, I have this edu.net code. Now this code that we are going to paste here, this is not, means go to the and move up. Where is the coding for so here you need to copy and paste this piece of coding. Copy it and paste it here. Okay, so here this is not so code that we are going to paste here, this is not related to forms authentication. This is edu.net code. So if you are new to edu.net, we have a video series recorded on edu.net as well. Okay, so first let's solve this compilation error that we see here. the compilation errors and look at that. The first error is configuration manager class. Configuration manager class. The configuration manager class is present in system.configuration. So that should solve that error. Means come here and import USI using system dot configuration. Where is the configuration? That should solve that error, and then SQL connection command, SQL connection and SQL command. These classes are present in system dot data dot system dot data dot SQL client namespace, and that should also solve the rest of the compilation errors. Okay, and command type is actually present in system.data. System.data, and that should solve the rest of the compilation errors. So let's okay, so that should have solved all these errors. Now what we are doing here, now the first line is interesting. If page dot is valid. Now if you remember, on the register page we are using validation control. On the register page we are using the validation control. These validation controls, we have spoken about them in the previous session, so please check that video session. But just to give you a quick overview on why we are using the page dot is valid, why we are using page dot is valid. If you know, the validation controls work both on the client side and on the server side. Clients can disable JavaScript, in which case client side validation will be disabled, and we want to do validation on server side, and validation control does that automatically. Now if the client has disabled validation on client side, and if some of the validation controls failed validation, then this page dot is valid. Property will return false. So if it return false, we don't want to do anything, so this block of code will not be executed. Means this block of code will not be executed. Okay, if it returns false, we don't want to do anything, so this block of code will not be executed. Instead the validation error messages will be displayed to the end user. Okay, so we want to do this only if page is valid. Okay, so we want to do this only if page is valid. So what are we doing here? Obviously we are retrieving the connection string. From web.config file. We are retrieving the connection string from web.config file. This is the connection string. So if you look at the web.config file, where is the web.config file? Okay, here in the root directory I have connection string with name dbcs3. So I am pointing to my local server. dbcs3 database. Here is catalog. That is the user ID. That is the user ID and the password. So we are retrieving the connection string. So we are retrieving the connection string, and we are creating the connection object, and we are creating the connection object. And the command type is sp register. Command type is sp register user. Command type is stored and we are specifying the command type stored procedure. Command type stored procedure, and we are creating 3 SQL parameter object. We are creating 3 SQL parameter object. These are SQL parameter objects. Okay, these are the 3 SQL parameter objects. Okay, and then we are associating those parameter object with the command object. We are associating those SQL parameter object with the command objects using the parameter collection. Okay. Open the connection, execute the command. Now we are using execute scalar. Because if you look at the stored procedure, it is selecting a single value. If you look at the database stored procedure, it is selecting a single value here. Okay, so that is why we are using execute scalar. And then execute scalar returns on object type. Then execute scalar returns an object type, but we know that we are going to get an integer. We are going to get an integer back, so I am typecasting that. Here it is. I am typecasting that because execute scalar returns an object type, but we know that we are going to get an integer back, so I am typecasting that to be of type integer. Storing it in the variable return code. And look at that. I am comparing look at that. I am comparing if return code is -1, that means username is already in use. We have to choose another user with the name. We choose another user with the name. On the other hand, otherwise we redirect the user to the logging page. Okay, here. So on the logging page, he can enter his logging page. He can enter his newly created username and password, and then logging. Okay, and then logging. So it is such a simple code there. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this application. So F5, I will get an error because of I did not execute the stored procedure. So showing you that go to here and enter test. Test is the password, test is the confirm password, and then test at the test.com. I will get an error because I did not execute the stored procedure. Okay, here could not find stored procedure. That is because we have not created this stored procedure yet. So let's go ahead and create that. Means close this and go to the database and create the stored procedure. So come here and execute this. Execute it. Now let's go back. So go back to the login page and run it once again. So get to the register, type test and test. So test is the password. Confirm password is test. Click register. Here you should look at that. Redirected me. It redirected me. It redirected me to login page, which means it has already added that test user. So let's quickly check it. Means go to the and select, execute it. Okay, test user is added. Password is test. Email is test@test.com. Okay, that is fine. Let's try to add another user with the same name. So I am going to add test again. I'm going to supply the same username again. Let me click register. Look at that, username already in use. Means if we go back to the browser and I press test and test and test and click register, username already in use, please choose another username. Look at that, username already in use. Please choose another username. So everything is working fine, everything is good, but there is one issue here. If you look at the way we are storing the password here, if you look at the way we are storing the password here, we are storing them in plain text. We are storing them in plain text. Now in reality, in real time, you should not be storing password in plain text. You know that because of several legislation rules as well as the organization standards, even the administrator of this application should not be knowing the password of the other user. Okay, so we want to encrypt and store the password. So how do we encrypt them? To encrypt, it is very easy. So within the register page, now .NET Framework has provided a method called, means go back to the, you need to close it, go back to the register.axpx page. Where is the register.axpx page? So .NET Framework .NET Framework has provided a method called a hash password storing in config file. That is the name of the method, and that method is present in form authentication class. So form authentication is obviously present in system.web.security. So we need to add namespace here. First of all, system.web.security. And then what I want to do, if you remember, if you look at this code here, we are passing the value for password. If you look at here, we are passing the value for the password parameter at this line. So, and I am passing that, directly by retrieving it from the password, from the password, from the password text box. Instead of that, retrieve that value and encrypt that, and then pass the encrypted value to this parameter. Okay, to this parameter, that encrypted value passed to this parameter. So how do I encrypt the password? To encrypt the password, so let's create a variable. Where we need to create a variable? We need to create a variable here, string. Let's create a variable encrypted password. Okay. Means we need to do what? Encrypted password is equal to, I'm going to use the form authentication class. I'm going to use form authentication I'm going to use form authentication class. Where is the form authentication class? Dot. There is a method called hash password for storing in config. Hash password for storing config file. And look at the return type of this method. This method takes two parameter. This method takes two parameter. Where you can see it here. Takes two parameter, the password that we want to encrypt, and what is the algorithm, that we want to use. You know, do we want to use SHA-1 encryption algorithm or MD5? Which encryption algorithm? Okay, so where is the password present? The password is present in text password, text box. So I'm going to retrieve that, and then I also need to specify the means what you need to type here. Text password txt. The password present in text password dot text. So I'm going to retrieve that, and then I also need to specify the password format. So I'm going to use SHA-1. SHA-1. What is it is saying? Okay, so that is going to encrypt the password using that algorithm. So to see this, go here, and we need to copy and paste it here. So why it is showing obsolete? So we need to use obsolete. We have to use obsolete. And paste it here. Here. Okay. So that is going to encrypt the password using the algorithm, and return that, and we are storing that in this variable. We are storing this in this variable. So copy this variable, and I'm going to use that, pass it to this parameter. Means you need to paste it here as a value. Okay, so with this change, let's go ahead and run this. So I am save all the changes and go to the login page, run this. So I click here to register link. So I get the register page. So let's give another username test1. Type here test test1. That is the password. Test test, and let's say test at test.com. At let's say test at test.com. Click register. So I am redirecting to the login ax.axp page. Now let's go back to the table. Look at the password, means go to the database and look at the password, run it, execute. Look at the password here, is now encrypted. It is not present in plain text format. Okay, so far in the video we have discussed how to register the user. Okay, in the next video session we will discuss about authenticating with the credential that we have just stored. Now at the moment you look at that, I will not be able to log in using test, means go back to the browser. Where is the browser? So look at that, I will not be able to log in using test or test1. Means if I type here test and test1 and click the login, because at the moment we have not implemented that. In the previous session we have actually discussed how to authenticate using the username. As you can see, we have write no coding in the logging, means close this browser. We have not written any coding here. Okay, but we in previous session we have showed that in using the username and password that we have stored in the web.config file. But in reality we don't really store username and password in web.config file. We store them in the database like this, and we want to be validating against this list, validating against this list that is present in the database, instead of using the list that I have in the web.config file, We don't need to do validating against this list. Okay, we store them in the database. Username, we store the username and password in the database. We want to be validating against this list that is present in here, instead of using the list that I have in the web.config file. Okay. In the next video, we will discuss about that in the next video session. We will discuss about that in the next video session. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.